Hello everyone, I welcome you all to another video by Legacy IAS where we are going to talk about the entire relationship based on fundamental constitutional values between India and one of its age-old friends, that is Russia, which is former USSR. This particular country, especially in the backdrop of the Ukraine war, or rather the Ukrainian-Russian conflict that is there in the world that is witnessing, we've seen how India has in a lot of ways explicitly and implicitly been on Russia's side. Alright, so a lot of this particular friendship emanates from fundamental constitutional similarities and convergences. On a lot of areas, our fundamental values kind of meet, our constitutional systems and practices kind of converge. So with respect to your specific portion of comparison between constitutions and as an implicit derivation with regards to Indo-Russian relationship, this particular discussion is going to be extremely relevant. Now, if we look at this particular relationship or these particular constitution systems, let us begin by understanding that India, while framing the constitution, what are the features that it borrowed or were influenced from the Russian constitution? Now, the first is the concept of fundamental duties. The idea whereby the whole purpose of not just giving rights to individuals, to its citizens, but also the fact that you are also binding them to some kind of duty so that they are not just expecting from the country, but they also have something to give it in return, so that it's both of a mutual relationship and they feel a part of the country in a lot of ways. This kind of a system, this concept was something that India was influenced from the Russian constitution, and we have introduced through an amendment the fundamental duties into our constitution. The whole idea of justice, social, economic, political, which is mentioned in the preamble, the way in which we envision justice, our thought process is something that is influenced from the Russian constitution. How we are trying to provide justice, not just in terms of very by the book legal words, but something that has larger socio-political economic connotations. That is a concept which again we were influenced from the Russian constitution. The whole idea where which we were so cautious at the outset when we started planning our country, or we started managing the administration of the country, then we were very cautious and we wanted a lot of the economic development that will happen in the country in the hands of the state. This kind of concept of economic planning was something that was borrowed from the Russian constitution, and we actually for the longest of time had an organization, had a body called the Planning Commission, who was entrusted with this responsibility of economic development for the country. So in that sense, these are three very, very important, crucial elements of the Indian constitution which are largely influenced from the Russian constitution. Now let's come to the areas in which these two constitutions kind of have a lot of similarity. They kind of have convergences. First is the fact that the appointment of the Prime Minister is being done by the President. India has a parliamentary form for government. Russia, of course, doesn't. But there's also the similarity that the appointment of the Prime Minister, a very, very important constitutional position, is being done by the President. The Duma is more powerful, like the Lok Sabha, which is there in India as compared to the Rajya Sabha. So the lower house, which is there in Russia, is equally as powerful and important comparatively, like you have the Lok Sabha in India. That is again a point of comparison, a point of similarity rather. Education has been made a fundamental right for its citizens of USSR, former USSR, according to the constitution. So the constitution of former USSR, and of course still today, they have been providing education as a fundamental right. Now when we started our journey, we were not capable of providing this as a fundamental right. Hence it was a part of directive principles. But when we managed to have the capability to kind of converge it and translate it into a fundamental right, we also did that. So there has been also some amount of influence in that respect, and more than that, there has been an area of convergence as well, that both the countries now have education given such a lot of primary importance. But besides all these convergences and similarities and influences, there are also some important differences which are there between the constitutions of the two countries. Now, Russia, in terms of the way in which its country is formed, the form of government that is there, that is semi-presidential. All right. India, on the other hand, has a parliamentary form of government. We don't really have the extensive kind of separation of powers that is there in a presidential form of government. There, the president is the sole executive. Here, we have the prime minister, who is actually the real executive, and the president is the de facto executive. All right, so in that sense we are more lean towards the parliamentary form of government which we borrowed from the United Kingdom. Also, the president is much stronger in Russia as compared to the prime minister in the case of India. So here, like I was telling you about the de facto and the real the de jure head. Okay, so how the real power lies actually in the hands of the prime minister and the council of ministers, who aids and advise the president in the functioning of a lot of its executive, legislative and judicial powers. So in that sense, the real power, where it lies, that is where fundamentally, so there's a basic difference in the form of government that is being there between the two countries, of a semi-presidential and a parliamentary form of government. Also, we have, with respect to the position of the president, we see that the president of Russia is directly elected by the people. This is a very important, consideration, a very important distinction, because here in India, if we look at the president, the position of the president, we have an indirect election, and that too by an electoral college. Okay. This electoral college is responsible for the election, and as far as the prime minister is also concerned, we actually elect all the members of the parliament, and from them, whoever the president feels is the leader of that majority party and enjoys the confidence of the lower house, that person is actually made the prime minister. So in that sense, direct election is actually not really a phenomena for both the president and prime minister for that matter. All right. Of course, that person who eventually becomes the prime minister is directly elected by the people, but that person is eventually, as prime minister, is appointed. So this direct election in Russia is something which is a very distinct feature of the constitution there. Moreover, if we look at the tenure, the term of office for which the president comes to power, it's 6 years for the case of Russia. In India, it's 5 years. All right. Moreover, there is an upper limit to the election of the Russian president. There is an upper limit of 2 terms, more than beyond which he or she for that matter cannot be a president anymore. Now, as we speak, there are proposals for a constitutional amendment also going on in Russia to kind of extend and make sure that there is longer term for Mr. Putin to serve as the president. But besides that, as of today, it stands at 2 terms on a maximum limit. In the absence of the president, the prime minister performs the functions of the president. So here we have, in the absence of the president in India, if we see, we have the vice president performing the functions of the president. But if we look at the Russian constitution, we have the prime minister who's actually performing the functions of the president in the absence of the president. So the kind of relationship that is there, the kind of one taking place of the other, that kind of equation is something again very different in the Russian constitution as far as the Indian is concerned. If we look at from executive, if we come to the legislature of Russia, we see that the method of election of the Duma members, the lower house, is actually proportional representation. In India, we have the system of first past the post for simplicity, so that the electorate, the voters kind of understand the system. It's easy to manage in a country like India, but here we have proportional representation. Moreover, the Duma has the power to pass the no confidence motion, which is similar to the Indian case, but with a catch that this particular no confidence motion can be discarded by the president. Now, we do not have this kind of a situation in India that the president can overrule or keep aside a no confidence motion which is being brought forward by the legislature, all right, or for that matter, the Lok Sabha. Now that is again a very, very fundamental difference, which kind of shows the importance that is being given to the position of the president in Russia. If you look at the judiciary there, we see that, unlike the integrated and independent judiciary that is there of India, we have Russia having an independent constitutional court as well as the Supreme Court as the apex. When we see the constitutional court there, the whole purpose of this constitutional court is to adjudicates the disputes. All right, now the entire adjudication of this dispute is going to be taken up between the executive and the legislature, and between the capital, meaning the central, the capital city, the Moscow, and also the regional and local governments of the country. More also, if we look at move towards the Supreme Court, we have Supreme Court being the highest court in Russia, which is actually supervising all the inferior courts that are there on your general matters of on your matters of general jurisdiction. All right, so there are these important differences in the entire structure of both the executive, legislature, as well as the judiciary when we look at the Indian as well as the Russian constitutions. So in our comparison, in our understanding, we have gone through the influences, the features which we have borrowed from the Russian constitution, and also the areas of convergences and differences. And this is how we make a comparative analysis of the constitutions of the two countries. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. Thank you so much.